Hi, in this video, I'm going to talk about rendering points in QGIS. There are several renderers specifically for points, and they're especially useful when you have a situation shown on this slide where there are so many points that they're stacked on top of one another and you can't distinguish individual features. Okay, so here I have QGIS open, and I have the points QGIS project loaded, which just has two layers: places, named places from OpenStreetMap, and the country boundaries. So what I'm going to do here first is show you one renderer that we can use for these. I'm going to make a copy of places just so that we can keep track of what the original data looked like. And on the places layer here, I'm going to change the renderer from single symbol to point cluster. And what this is going to do is give us a symbol that indicates how many points are stacked at one location. So in this spot, there are 22 points stacked at this zoom scale. So as with some other effects we've looked at in this course, this is scale dependent. If I zoom into North Shelland, we will see the effect change because now there are fewer points stacked at this scale. And in the layer styling panel, you can see that there are options for changing the styling of this. So the cluster symbol here can be changed by clicking on that icon, and it's a stacked symbol. There's a font marker, and that is the symbol for the number in the circle, and then there's a symbol for the marker itself. So if we wanted to, we could make this resemble the same kind of greenish yellow point that is on there now, but with a label on it. So for example, I could go back and go to the render settings and copy this color, go back to the cluster symbol, and in this simple marker, paste that color. And then I'm going to go to the font marker and simply make the fill color for this font black so that I can see the number on top. And you can change the font here. It's using the default MS Shell Dig, but I could go and change this to another font that's more commonly used, such as Arial. And I could then also change things like the weight of the font to make it bold and the size of the font. So that's the cluster renderer. For some projects, it may be desirable to have an actual heat map that shows a raster data set from the points. And fortunately, QGIS not only allows you to create raster heat map layers, but there's a heat map renderer that we can use to generate a heat map on the fly against these points. So I'm going to turn off this one places layer that we've used the cluster renderer on, and I'll turn on, I'll make another duplication of the originally styled layer, turn this on, and I'll rename this heat map so we can keep track of that. And for this heat map layer, I'm going to change the single symbol renderer to a heat map renderer. And you see a basic heat map being developed on a black to white color ramp. So I can obviously change the color ramp. Maybe I'll choose red, yellow, green. And invert that color ramp so that the point clusters are red instead of green. And there's some other settings here that I can adjust. There's the radius. This is how many, in this case, millimeters, QGIS is looking from each point to find other points in generating the heat map. So you can increase or decrease this value to generate different heat maps. So if I increase this value, still zoomed into North Shelland here, it's going to search in a broader area to search for extra points in generating that heat map. And if I zoom to the previous extent, this will take a little time to render, but we get heat map for all of Denmark, zoomed out at this scale. I can expand layer rendering and set the layer blending mode to addition so that I can see the base map and Denmark's boundaries underneath the heat map. It's also possible to weight the heat map by data. So here, if I hit the drop down for weight points by, I have a population data column with my places. So I could actually weight the points by the population in each point. And that's obviously going to highlight some of the bigger cities like Copenhagen, Odense, Aarhus, Aalborg, etc. I'll clear that. I'm going to put the radius back at the default value of 10 millimeters here. And you can also change the units of this to something like meters at scale if you want to actually create that at in meters. So here we have a nice heat map generated from those points, and we combine that with the cluster renderer, and you can see we have very quickly two different ways to visualize these points and create different looks for that data. And that's really what data visualization comes down to, is using these tools to come up with something that tells the story that you're trying to tell on the map. And so it may be a heat map, it may be the point cluster renderer, but these are two nice choices you have when you have densely clustered points on a map.